Good evening and welcome to In Focus. And tonight, two stories about pressure. One on humanitarian lifelines and the other one on the global economy. In Gaza, Israel says it will suspend the operations of more than 24 international aid organizations from January the 1st, raising concerns about how assistance is delivered at a sensitive moment on the ground. And in energy markets, oil ends 2025 on a downward track, with oversupply fears weighing on prices heading into 2026. Two very different headlines, but the same question underneath. Who absorbs the cost when systems tighten? And I'm Salma El-Fiki, and this is In Focus, where we cut through the noise and stay with what really shifts the story. Israel says it will halt the operations of more than 24 international humanitarian organizations in Gaza from January the 1st, inciting new vetting and transparency rules. Aid agencies warn the move could disrupt critical medical and relief services for civilians. Israel says the suspensions target organizations it says did not meet the updated requirements on staffing, funding, disclosure, and operational reporting. Several major NGOs are on the list, and the immediate concern is capacity, fewer teams, fewer clinics, fewer distribution partners, and slower delivery in a territory already operating at the edge. The deeper issue is governance of aid. Israel is seeking stricter control and screening, while humanitarian groups say the standards can be arbitrary and could compromise their work and staff safety. The next test is whether exemptions, appeals, or alternative channels appear quickly enough to prevent gaps in food, healthcare, and basic services. And for further analysis, we are joined from Cairo by a researcher in Israeli affairs and an Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs member, Dr. Ahmed Fouad Anwar. Welcome, sir, to Qnews, and thank you so much for joining me here today. Sir, I will start off by asking you, is this mainly a compliance move or just a broader attempt to reshape the aid architecture in Gaza and tighten control over who operates there, do you think? Sir, can you hear me? Let me repeat the question again. Is this mainly a compliance move, do you think, or just a broader attempt to reshape the aid architecture in Gaza and tighten control over who operates there, in your opinion?
Of course, good evening to you and to everyone who's watching. I think that phase two is mandatory, and Netanyahu and his extremist country are trying to escape this agreement and not comply all the points that were signed and implemented. And we have already started implementing the agreement, and they are always trying to take it out of context and trying to get the Palestinian side to comply to all points while not complying to any, and violating lots of the points. And so here we cannot just live like this forever, and I don't think that the balance of powers cannot hold while this is still happening.
Dr. Anwar, what is the real operational impact? Which services break first? Do you think it's healthcare or food distribution or shelter support or logistics?
All of them are necessities and they absolutely need this for a living. They are basic human needs and rights. And the Palestinians have been suffering for around 3 years, and then before that there was such a strict siege by Israel. And I think that yeah, the country still want to keep the Palestinians and then to let them keep their land through early healing, reconstruction, and just giving them hope through some kind of conference that makes it clear for every side what their duties are, what they should expect from the other side as well.
Sir, Israel cites transparency and vetting. Aid groups warn the rules could be arbitrary. What would be, do you think, a credible and workable vetting framework look like without paralyzing delivery?
Of course, Israel is conducting some kind of a war on a media level and mentally also. They are just trying to mess with people there, and they are trying to just change reality through media. And so Israel has been trying to just stop aid, and they aren't um, offering some kind of an alternative. And this is the same thing for all the measures. And then they had carried out some kind of death traps when they were distributing food and aid through them, and then it turned out that they were just attacking and killing the civilians there. And so all of this here, it is now clear for the public opinion, even internally in Israel.
Sir, if major NGOs are pushed out, in that case, who fills the gap? Is it the UN agencies, local partners, private contractors, or ad hoc networks? And what risk comes with each option, if you can tell us, please?
And this is a very good question, actually, because there is no alternative here for the United Nations and institutions. They have experience, like the UNRWA, for example. It is very important here for the Palestinians. They are trying to get the Palestinians their basic needs, and to serve children and the elderly. And they are their priority, because, as you know, young adults and adults can actually stand up to this war, kind of. And they have been trying to remove the rubble. We need this, and we need health care for the Palestinians. And so I don't think that the UNRWA is irreplaceable. And any attempt to have any new organizations, or to get the Israeli occupation forces to distribute aid and food, this has been proven that it is just some kind of attempt to save face for Israel.
Sir, do you think this change could become a leverage in wider negotiations by maybe indirectly pressuring the humanitarian environment?
Yeah, of course. Israel is trying to take advantage of the humanitarian situation to leverage the negotiators to try to reach what they want, and to pressure the resistance to disarm without complying to the rest of the Sharm el-Sheikh agreement points. And so here in this context, of course, there are lots of lies that we can actually expose, especially that the Israeli occupation forces haven't reached their goals. And so Israel is trying, through doing all of this, they are trying to have some kind of leverage with the negotiators.
Dr. Anwar, can you tell us what should our viewers watch for in the next 2 weeks that could tell us whether this becomes a short disruption or a longer term shift in policy?
I think that the regional and international causes actually affect the negotiations. I think that the Gaza code has some kind of effect in other cases as well, and so they are all interlinked. And I think that after Netanyahu's visit to the USA, um, that he didn't actually achieve anything in this through this visit. He just we just listened to them talking about what will be happening in phase two, and he's on all end of his, but actually he didn't achieve any of his goals through this visit. And so I think that the mandatory path to phase two is what's likely in the Gaza Strip.
And from Cairo, that was Dr. Ahmed Fouad Anwar, the researcher in Israeli affairs and an Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs member. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us here today on Q News. And oil prices are ending 2025 under pressure, with markets focused on a potential supply glut and softer demand growth. Analysts say the oversupply risks could keep crude capped in early 2026, even when geopolitical headlines flare. And Brent is trading around the low $60 range and the WTI in the high 50s, with both benchmarks down sharply over the year as additional supply outpaces demand growth. The market is essentially pricing two forces at once: short-term spikes when geopolitical risks rise, and a ceiling driven by barrels on the horizon from non-OPEC supply growth and the possibility of a higher output if producers defend market share. The key question here is for 2026 is whether OPEC Plus can keep the market balanced without sacrificing price, while demand signals from major consumers, especially industry and transport, remain uneven. For more analysis into this situation, we are joined from Hong Kong by Dr. Marvin Lee, a PhD researcher at the University of Manchester. Welcome, sir, to Q News, and thank you for joining us here today. Sir, let me ask you and start off, what is driving the downtrend most? Demand softness or supply growth, or the market's belief that producers will not cut enough?
Assalamualaikum. Shukran li istidafati barakallahu fikum. Actually, it's a combination, but the primary driver is a supply growth from the non-OPEC plus sources like USA and Brazil, and clashing with structural demand shift in China. And this China's factor is quite important here because China has traditionally been the buyer of the last resort, but its aggressive move towards EV adoption, now over 50% of new car sales in 2025, means that its marginal demand for gasoline has slightly peaked. And second, the producer dilemma. The market is skeptical about OPEC Plus because of the physical market share trade-off. Investors believe that at some point, producers will prioritize volume over price to maintain their market dominance.
Dr. Lee, how much of the price weakness is structural and how much is cyclical as we're heading into 2026?
We are seeing a rare phenomenon. This is an energy transaction reality. For example, Saudi Arabia has been launching Saudi Vision 2030 because they have been forecasting that they need to proactively diversify its economy because they recognize the long-term structural decline in oil shares of the global energy mix, which means that they will earn less, which cannot be able to sustain their economic future. So that's why I believe it is quite a smart move for them to move forward. And second, a higher interest rate all around the world have cooled down the global manufacturing. However, as we head into 2026,
Mhm.
the cycle may turn if central banks continue to pivot toward easing. Through this may be offset by the massive wave of non-OPEC supply projects currently coming online.
Sir, can you tell us what are the real swing factors for the first quarter? Is it OPEC plus compliance? Is it US output, sanctions enforcement, or global inventories?
Actually, from my perspective, there is a X factor here.
Mhm.
So that the sanctions enforcements versus the China's strategic reserve. So China has been stockpiling lots of crude oil from all around the world because China needs lots of crude oil, lots of gasoline to kickstart all the manufacturing process because China is a world factory to the rest of the world. And second, the OPEC plus compliance within the globe. The focus is not just on Saudi Arabia, but on wherever nations like Iraq and Kazakhstan
Mhm.
will finally align with their quotas. If compliance slips, the oversupply narrative becomes a self-fulfilling uh, prophecy.
And if oversupply persists, how do we expect the price wars, deeper cuts, or a new equilibrium with lower prices for longer?
We are likely entering a new equilibrium of $60 to $70
Mhm.
around this price range because let us think from the Saudi perspective because this is quite important for their national income. Under Saudi Vision 2030, Saudi Arabia is becoming more financially resilient because they have been doing all the restructuring to diversify all the economy to move towards as a non-oil economy. But at this stage, they need a large amount of investment to make this happen. So that's why they need to set up this price range to in order to make everything into reality in the near future. So that's why so-called this new equilibrium, we have to consider the factor from Saudi Arabia because they have been playing a very large role here in terms of the oil market. They have lots of discursive
Mhm.
power in the oil market.
Yeah. And do you think geopolitics still moves the tape? What kind of shock would actually break the oversupply narrative? And what kind would only create a temporary spike, in your opinion?
In my opinion, we must distinguish between headline risks and flow disruptions.
Mhm.
And first, like the Red Sea tensions, or the any tensions around the world, like between Russia and Ukraine, and like in South China Sea, even in Iran, usually it create a fear premium of $3 to $5, like this increase of oil price that evaporates within days because the market knows that there is ample spare capacity, mostly in Saudi Arabia once again. And second, the narrative breaker, a shock that would truly break the narrative, will be a great power conflict that threatens the Strait of Hormuz or a total disruptions of the shadow fleet, like ships carrying the sanctions Russian or Iranian oil or to all around the world. If those barrels are forced off the market and cannot reach China, which is the biggest buyer in this world, and the supply service like vanquish instantly.
Dr. Lee, can you tell us, please, for consumers and governments, what does lower oil mean in 2026? Does it mean inflation relief or fiscal stress for producers or both?
Actually, this is a very challenging questions because, of course, they have both advantage and disadvantage. And for China and the Western world, it produced massive inflation relief. For China specifically, lower energy costs help offset their domestic uh, property sector woes and fuel their manufacturing-led recovery. However, China has been playing a very smart move here. They have been developing their solar energy, their wind power as an alternative power in order not to heavily rely on oil in the long future. and for the Western world. And we can see that the inflation keeps rising and quite problematic since the war between Russia and Ukraine. So maybe this can be a relief, a massive relief for these two worlds. And for producers, like it creates fiscal stress, but it also acts as a reform accelerator. And in Saudi Arabia, lower price prove exactly why Saudi Vision 2030 is necessary. It's a must move to move forward, to push country to another step. So it forces these economies to decouple from oil faster. The winner of 2026 will be the producer that has successfully diversified its revenue away from oil economy. So I believe it's UAE and Saudi Arabia.
Okay. Well, Dr. Lee, one more question. Sir, the OPEC Plus has cuts on paper, but compliance varies. How big is the credibility gap, and how does the market price fit that in?
Actually, we have to consider the geopolitical factor here. Uh, so like if we think like 10 years ago, it can be very different here. China has been um, has been trying to use all new energy to diversify its like to protect its national interests, even in case of war, in case of any military blockade, like launched by the U.S. navies. What if this happens? So there are lots of unprecedented risks against the oil market in 2026 and maybe in the following 3 to 4 years.
And from Hong Kong, that was Dr. Marvin Lee, a PhD researcher at the University of Manchester. Sir, thank you so much for your insights and for joining us here tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, and now we are going live to New York Times Square, where crews are putting the famous crystal-covered New Year's Eve ball through the final test run. And ahead of the countdown and the moment it descends the pole to welcome the new year.
It's in the down. Good? We're not doing good? Does say on the other side. You guys good? Because it actually does turn it on. Oh. Are we all good? We're good. Okay. All right. We good? Good afternoon and welcome to One Times Square. We are here today to test the New Year's Eve ball. It is hard to imagine that in less than 24 hours, hundreds of thousands of people will be here in Times Square, and 1 billion people worldwide will watch us say goodbye to 2025 and welcome in 2026. So we're going to test the ball today, but before we do that, I'm going to introduce my good friend, President and CEO of NYC Tourism and Convention, Julie Coker.
Woo! Thank you, Tom. All right. Thank you, Tom. So we're really excited. New York City welcomes over 64 million visitors a year, and 8 million of those visitors come between Thanksgiving and New Year's Eve. And the bulk of that demand comes for New Year's Eve. So we're really excited to have millions watching, as Tom said, but also, too, for folks to come and really enjoy and have a great holiday. But most importantly, we're really excited is that this is now available. The ball is now going to be available 365 days a year. So it's yet another experience that both domestic and international visitors can enjoy and certainly make memories. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry.
Hi, Sherry White here, welcoming you all from One Times Square. And as Julie mentioned, we are welcoming the public into the building a few weeks ago. If anybody hasn't been here, please come. We are close today. To see the ball up close.
Crews in New York's Times Square are putting the iconic New Year's Eve ball through a full test run today, checking the mechanics, the lighting and timing ahead of the countdown to 2026. The ball sits atop One Times Square, and on New Year's Eve it begins its descent at 11:59 p.m., taking about a minute to reach the bottom at midnight, the moment that officially marks the New Year's. And this year's centerpiece is the new Constellation Ball, unveiled recently as the biggest ball yet, built with thousands of crystals and advanced LED lighting designed for sharper patterns on camera and in the square. Organizers say the celebration gets underway earlier in the evening with the ball lit and raised at 6 p.m. before hours of performances and countdown moments leading up to midnight. And beyond the ball itself, there's the confetti tradition. More than 3,000 pounds of biodegradable confetti is set to rain down at midnight, including personal wishes submitted by the public through the official wishing wall. Security and crowd control are also ramping up. Police begin restricting access to the area throughout the day, starting around 43rd Street and Broadway, and moving north as sections fill. And once you are in a viewing area, leaving typically means you cannot re-enter.
I think there's 5,280 crystals on it. It's amazing. There are 5,280 waterproof crystal circles on that ball. We went from triangles to circles. Those circles are like stars in the sky. That's why we call it the constellation ball. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it's the star of our show tomorrow night. Which is why we love it. And it is looking good. Marvelous. Those are amazing statistics. I did not even realize.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. They come from all over the world.
From all over the world.
And so 70% of the people out there are from outside the tri-state area. And not only are people from all over the world, we have music from all over the world. Tomorrow night we've got everything from Diana Ross to Leigh Seraphim, Aaron Morris, Little Big Town, Avi, Hannah Barbara, B.O.B., and Tones and I. She's flying all the way in from Australia just to sing Imagine for us here in Times Square. And that message of Imagine is really a message of all of us. We'll all come together on New Year's Eve as one. So we'll be there. Thank you. Really appreciate you guys coming out. And I think we're at the top. Almost. Dad, oh my God. Oh, it's so exciting. Third child.
Absolutely.
I've grown up with this ball over 30 years. Yeah, you don't realize. Oh my golly. His mother was a globe. His father was a medicine man.
All right.
Okay, so 6 p.m. Josh is going to come back and he's going to flip that switch with his family and my family. We're going to kick off the celebration here in Times Square. All waiting for anticipation.
Tonight, we saw pressure applied in two very different ways: regulation that can narrow humanitarian space and market dynamics that can compress economies. In Gaza, the question is whether aid can keep moving as the rules tighten. And in oil, the question is whether oversupply turns into a new normal for 2026. In both cases, the next chapter is written by what happens after the headline: implementation, response, and the choices that follow. And I'm Salma El-Fiki. Thank you for watching tonight's episode of In Focus, and do stay tuned for more updates and analysis on Qnews.